Good morning. My name is Kathleen Oldfather, and I've been a member here for over 30 years. I welcome you, whether you are at home, on the road, or here in the sanctuary this morning. I welcome you to the UU Fellowship of Manhattan. In the spirit of Thanksgiving, I am thankful for you and for all the past members and friends I have had the privilege to know here. We learn so much from each other as we make sense of this world and our lives. Our theme this month, November, almost done, has been holding history. It's not just remembering, but holding that history, which sometimes means letting the pain and grief of that history in. If you're visiting for the first time today, please sign our visitor's book. We're glad that you're here, and please feel free to stay afterward and visit with people. There are announcements in the bulletin today, and I have one special announcement from Betty Banner. She's seeking 2 people who will help in a couple weeks on the Saturday before the Christmas or holiday sale, the baking and craft sale. She needs help on December 11th, which is Saturday, about 10:30 to 11 in there, 10 to 11? Between 10:30 and 11. Okay, between 10:30 and for about an hour. And please let Betty know if you can help with that. It's to set up for the sale. That way Sunday morning when we have the sale, it'll be just lickety-split. So. And would you like to light the chalice? Okay. We light this chalice in honor of the history that holds and heals us, for the stories of heroism that inspire our own, for the faces of loved ones who have passed, in whose images we see our better selves, for reminders of those who paved the path on which we travel and blessed us with advantages we didn't earn all on our own. These memories do not live in the past. They carve the contours of the present. They throw themselves into our futures and lure us into building a life better for all. They are here today. Look, listen, let them in. May their light guide our way. This morning's hymn is number 1051, We Are. And the words, they're already there. It moves fast. And I'd like to just note that Justin Trowbridge is playing the drum today. Nick McGoy had to do what a lot of us have to do sometimes. He had to work today. So. Okay. We're going to have some time with all ages today, and if we have any young people, I'd like to invite them up to help me. I have a little something to share with you. And I just realized maybe I should have had a different mic. Maybe we can do it right here. Can you come up here? Where do you want her? Kind of stand back here. Oh, great. Okay. Okay. That's all right. I'm not ready to. Oh, got another helper. Okay. It might take a couple helpers. Okay, can you hear me all right? All right. Well, we are going to talk about something called resilience, and I'm going to give you a recipe for resilience today. And I guess my question for everyone here is, how difficult was COVID for you? Was it hard to be home all the time? Yeah. Did you miss your friends? Did you miss your family who might be far away? I know I did. Have you been sick? Or does the news these days depress you? And do you find it hard to keep going some days? Well, resilience, it's a big word, is the ability to get through the bad things or the hard times and bounce back from life's difficult events. It doesn't mean that you don't experience stress or sadness and suffering. Resilient people tap into their strengths and support systems to overcome the challenges and work through problems. History shows us that we can work through challenges. So here's a recipe for resilience. It's been tweaked over time, so it may have to adjust as necessary. Sometimes it yields more than anticipated. Sometimes you need a bit more of this ingredient or that. And it comes from generations who have gone long before me, and I've added my own flavor along the way. So, Adeline, you want to help with Aunt Lily and Christopher? All right, the first ingredients for resistance is courage. Can we find and we'll put it in the mixing bowl here. Courage to be brave and strong when you have to. Okay, now we need 2 parts of tears. Tears of failure, because we've learned in the past sometimes things fail, but we can keep on going. And tears of doubt. Will I do the right thing? Is this the right thing? There you go. 1 part of deep listening. Listen to the people around us. What are they telling us? Listen to ourselves. Listen to our hearts. That's kind of a big one, isn't it? 1 part each of silence and laughter. Silence to process it all, to meditate, to rest. And laughter to feel better, to remember the good times, the past and the good times ahead. A dash of trust is needed. Trust that we're going to get through this. And a pinch of wonder. A pinch of wonder. I know sometimes during COVID when we walked, we'd see beautiful things in nature that just reminded us of wonder. You know, the buds opening, the leaves, the red in the leaves. And we need a heaping scoops of naps and snacks. I'm a big napper, believe in, and snacks, well, we all love snacks. Help get us through. Okay, in a separate bowl here, these are the things we kind of do for ourselves and find in ourselves. In this other bowl, mix family. Can you find any family over there? I know they're out there, but can you hold up the family? Because it's so artistic. And we need friends. Separate bowl. We mix family and friends. And those, okay, friends, to help get through the hard times. And those that challenge us to be our best self. Can we see any challenge over there? That's a big word. And sometimes we even need those people that disagree with us. Sometimes we get to better results if we have some people that disagree. Okay, so now we can mix, not yet, mix these two together. You want to dump those in there and mix it? So slowly to the larger pot, add the others. Mix in with our friends and family, and then add a bay leaf. For whatever it is a bay leaf does, or bay leaves do. Okay. And simmer it for as long as needed, which is often longer than you realize or anticipate. Keep the heat at an even temperature, hot enough to cook throughout, but not so hot as it burns the bottom. Resilience can be served, we'll serve it when it's all done today, served at room temperature, warm, or even cold, if necessary. Serve alongside your favorite soft blanket, or your favorite dog, or your favorite cat, or other soft item. Make often, share with others, hold on to the leftovers. You'll need them after a long day that challenges your soul. So, thank you very much.
Shine your light in all you do. They are with us still, by Kathleen McTeague. In the struggles we choose for ourselves, in the ways we move forward in our lives and bring our world forward to us, it is right to remember the names of those who gave us strength in this choice of living. It is right to name the power of hard lives well lived. We share a history with those lives. We belong to the same motion. They too were strengthened by what had gone before. They too were drawn on by the vision of what might come to be. Those who lived before us, who struggled for justice and suffered injustice before us, have not melted into the dust and have not disappeared. They are with us still. The lives they lived hold us steady. Their words remind us and call us back to ourselves. Their courage and love evoke our own. We, the living, carry them with us. We are their voices, their hands, and their hearts. We take them with us, and with them choose the deeper path of living. So might it be.
Now is the time for the offertory, and just a reminder that this is still the November, and we're supporting Manhattan Emergency Shelter for holiday gifts for people that live there or families that live there. So if you would like to make an offering to that, or to support the fellowship as a whole, which you should make note of if it's a check, there is a basket in the back that you could take your contribution to. Ready? Okay. 1, 2. I think I forgot to recommend that you do any joys and concerns that you might have had. Joys and sorrows. Are there any more? Okay, we have some coming in. I have one. Okay. Did you have one? From Mark Mayfield, this is a joy. He's glad to have daughter Clara here. Back in the back. She's with him today, and Helen also is visiting from college. Clara Mayfield led her Carleton cross-country team to the 21st place in the nation in the national championships, and she was 10th overall and was named All-American. Wow. And from Bryce Hobrock, he said, I note the unexpected death of my cousin, age 85, Milan Masters, on Tuesday. He had the spirit of the pioneers. He was my childhood best friend. With the nickname Mustard, that represented the strength of the rural people. If life deals you a bad hand, just put a little mustard in it. We should have put that in our recipe today. We attended the funeral yesterday and reconnected with family. And Michael Oldfather, I want to tell you that Mel is still here. Okay. Susan.
Good morning. I'll start my reading with a quote from Utah Phillips. The long memory is the most radical idea in the country. It is the loss of long memory which deprives our people of that connective flow of thoughts and events that clarifies our vision, not of where we're going, but where we want to go. The reading is Radicalizing Myself by Jabari S. Jones. For Christmas, I bought myself a test kit from AfricanAncestry.com. With a simple cheek swab, I can learn about my African roots through my inherited genetic lineages. Like many Black folks who are descendants of enslaved African Americans, people who survived hundreds of years with their families repeatedly torn apart, cut off from their roots, I want to know where I'm from. Learning about my roots is a radicalizing journey. The word radical means to the root. The Akan tribe in Ghana have a word, Sankofa, symbolized by a bird with its head turned around to take an egg from its back. The Sankofa heron illustrates a Twi proverb, Sewo wer fina Sankofa a Yankee. Translated, it says, it's no sin to go back and fetch what you have forgotten. I've adopted the practice of spiritual reconnection with my ancestors to heal intergenerational trauma, because we cannot heal and grow at the same time. I read books on whiteness and on Black history, a history for which there is no national standard or curriculum. I read these to better understand how I got here and imagine where I want to go. One thing I've learned is that at the core of white privilege is the entitlement to amnesia and ignorance. To forget that America was founded on stolen land, stolen labor, and genocide, and that we live in a society structured by this history, is to embrace an identity rooted in a false innocence and a flight from truth and healing. This is the rot at the root of the nation.
Now we'll watch a message from Jill Jarvis, Reverend Jill Jarvis.
Good morning, UUFM. It's good to be virtually with you again this beautiful, chilly fall weekend. I thought I'd share something with you that I'm pretty excited about, which is that the new Steven Spielberg version of West Side Story will finally be released next month after more than a year's delay due to COVID. It may be a good long time before it's safe to go into a theater again, but still, I'm excited because as a kid, I was absolutely obsessed with the original 1961 movie. Within the first couple of years it was out, I saw it more than 30 times. And this was long before I had a driver's license. So my parents became increasingly less enthusiastic. I loved the tragic love story, the setting, the dancing, the music, most definitely the music. In fact, I loved West Side Story so much that when I got an assignment to present a special project to my 6th grade class on the subject of my choice, I chose West Side Story. Now, it may occur to you that a movie, no matter how special, is not really in itself the subject for academic exploration, that the presentation might end up more like a book report with no actual point. And that did occur to me, but I didn't care. I just wanted to share the wonder of this movie, to tell the romantic story, to give some background and show some slides, and most of all, most of all to play a few of my favorite songs. I thought I might get away with this because I was one of Mrs. Browning's favorites. But the evening after my presentation, my mother got a call from a very unhappy Mrs. Browning. The problem wasn't the lack of a point. The problem was one of the songs I chose for the play for the class. It was, she said, inappropriate. You might think she was upset about Officer Krupke. You know, my mother wears a mustache, my sister wears a mustache, my brother wears a dress. And hey, this was 1961 after all. Nope. The song Mrs. Browning found inappropriate for class was America. Life is all right in America if you're all white in America. And the many accompanying lines describing racial discrimination facing immigrants. And this ran counter to the narrative we'd always been taught in our all-white middle-class school. It was inappropriate that we be exposed to part of America's story that for us had always been silenced. How ironic that in only a couple of years, the civil rights movement would be making headlines. And appropriate or not, tragic parts of that missing story would be revealed to us by voices that refused to stay silent. Now, 50 years later, and the process has only intensified. The awareness that the American narrative we've been taught to believe is at the very least not the whole story, certainly not the objectively true story. That awareness has finally escaped its comfortable home in academia and leftist political circles and burst into mainstream American consciousness, where many find it to be, well, worse than inappropriate, in fact, downright subversive. Subversive to suggest that American institutions, traditions, and ideals were created and evolved and continue to exist within a culture of white supremacy. Not surprisingly, that interpretation has further divided an already deeply divided country, which is especially poignant this time of year. Do we celebrate the wondrous coming together of grateful pilgrims and helpful Indians and a harvest feast symbolizing the bounty of this God-ordained city on the hill yet to be built? Or do we mourn this portentous encounter of European invaders with the people of the land who would suffer displacement and disease and genocide at their hand? I believe that our religious values call us to be in solidarity with the vulnerable and the oppressed, even as each of us is both privileged and powerless in varying degrees. I know that we Unitarian Universalists are making real progress in naming the ways parts of our own denominational history have been silenced. Again, both a result and a cause of white supremacy culture. And I know, as many of you do, that relationships with the people in our lives who don't want to hear it, who refuse to believe it, who dismiss the very reality of the harm that's been created, even as they dismiss the voices of those who continue to experience it directly, some of those relationships have become very strained, be it with neighbors, co-workers, family members, longtime friends, or even occasional fellow UUs. For so many living in America, it's a dilemma that's far beyond disagreeing about politics. The question is more about how to maintain significant relations with people whose deepest values about life and humanity, about compassion and justice, apparently conflict with our own, without simply agreeing to disagree about others' humanity. Certainly, these more intimate relationship divides mirror what's happening in our country. As one example that began pre-pandemic, consider the reaction to the 1619 Project. published by the New York Times over 2 years ago. An investigative journalist and staff writer, Nicole Hannah-Jones, led the development of a multimedia project making the claim that the moment in 1619 when the kidnapped Africans arrived in the English colonies enslaved could rightfully be considered the origin of the United States. Enslavement, according to this view, shaped our traditions and institutions and has left an enduring legacy of racial inequality. The initial pushback, of course there was pushback, centered on one line in Hannah-Jones's introduction, where she stated that one of the primary reasons the colonists decided to declare their independence from Britain was because they wanted to protect the institution of slavery. The Times was asked, but declined to correct that line, but agreed to clarify it to say that protecting slavery was one of the primary reasons for some of the colonists. It was inevitable that some politicians would get involved. Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas declared that the project threatened the integrity of the Union by denying the true principles on which it was founded. Then President Trump called it a crusade against America, toxic propaganda, ideological poison that could dissolve the civic bonds that tie us together. Now, 2 years later, 12 states have enacted some form of ban on using federal funds to teach the principles of the 1619 Project. In Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis stated, "We know why the colonists revolted against Britain because they told us. They wrote pamphlets, they had committees of correspondence, they wrote a Declaration of Independence. I think we've got to have an education system that is preferring fact over narratives." I have to wonder if DeSantis has ever thought about how historical facts are created, because they don't just happen, they are created. The powerful narrative that we call history is created from stories that contain untold silences. Haitian anthropologist Michel Rolfe-Trillo wrote about this in his book, Silencing the Past: Power and the Production of History. He names 4 moments where stories are silenced. First, in the creation of what we call facts. Facts aren't abstract and meaningless. They only become historical facts because they matter in some sense. And they're not created equal. When facts are created, so necessarily are silences, the occurrences that are not noted. Any single event enters history with some of its parts missing, left out while other parts are recorded. And this happens naturally when the recorder has no conscious agenda, just because noting every aspect of an event, even the accessible aspects, would make the reporting incomprehensible. Trujillo uses the example of a sportscaster giving a play-by-play account of a baseball game. They only tell about the events that matter to the game, not the ones that are peripheral. The audience isn't mentioned, except insofar as it's influencing the players, and the players on the bench are left out of the narrative. This first accounting, these recorded facts, have created innumerable silences, any of which may have mattered greatly in other contexts, but not for finding the meaning in that game. The second point at which stories are silenced is in the creation of archives and documents, pulling together these recorded sources and facts. This is a process that conveys authority as it selects the stories that matter. Themes and meanings are chosen. Power and privilege enters into the process in ways both obvious and unseen. History is once again silenced when the created facts and documents are retrieved by those who create the narrative. Even when we assume there's no agenda here, the events that have been recorded and archived are already filled with created silences. Weight is given depending on which facts are more heavily reported with more details and depth. The narratives are shaped by access to well-known language and culture, to literacy. It's a process that often excludes the majority of participants in any historical event. And finally, those combined silences accrued through the first 3 steps of the process of producing history intermingle and mutually enforce each other to influence what is received as trustworthy and given respect. Celebrations such as Thanksgiving Day and Trujillo's words impose a silence upon the events they ignore and fill that silence with narratives of power about the event they celebrate. And so I have to disagree with Ron DeSantis' attempts to suppress the search for stories that have been silenced in the name of having an educational system that prefers facts over narrative. What could that even mean? We're facing a situation where large numbers of our fellow Americans don't want to know and don't want future generations to learn a more inclusive history. That's become the latest controversy in the deep polarization that in many cases is tearing relationships apart. The New York Times reported on a study by political scientists in 2019, and then note that that is pre-pandemic, which found that over 42% of people in each political party viewed the opposition not only as wrong, but as downright evil. Evil. Nearly 1 in 5 in both parties agreed with the statement that their adversaries lacked the traits to be considered fully human. They behave like animals. 20% of Democrats and 16% of Republicans admitted to sometimes believing the country would be better off if large numbers of the opposition died. Again, this was in 2019. I shudder to think how these numbers would look today. It's helped me to remember, though, what I actually believe about humanity. My deepest theological belief, even if not always a popular one among some UUs, I've been pleased to see it reflected in the writings of Reverend John Pavlovitz, who's a writer, activist, and pastor who's committed to equality and diversity and justice. Essays from his blog, which is called Stuff That Needs to Be Said, are frequently shared among progressives. Recently, he blogged about his own feelings of alienation from people seemingly committed to hateful worldviews. He wrote, "Right now, the one fragile reality we can hold on to is that every person believes they are good and right. No one ever genuinely imagines that they are doing damage, that they are being hateful and bad as someone might appear from across a table or across a Twitter exchange or across the aisle. No one ever thinks they are the bad guy. In a nation of 30 million people, there are exactly 0 who believe they are wrong or hurtful. And this is at least a place we can find." The comments in response to this essay were, as usual, enthusiastically affirming, except on that one point. Many vehemently disagreed with the concept that each of us is doing the best we can according to our own criteria, however distorted. That seemed just unthinkable to some, given the great harm that we all see being created every time we turn around. I see this too reflected in discussions about reviewing some of our UU covenants and removing the promise to assume good intentions. My impression is that assuming good intentions or believing that each of us believes we are doing good at any given time, a belief backed by science, by the way, is seen as tantamount to excusing harmful behavior, although we've stated that impact matters more than intent. And I think there are 2 unfortunate and unforeseen consequences to not assuming that everyone has good intentions, even for their harmful behavior. First, it denies the reality that good intentions often do create harm. Each of us is capable of good and evil, and knowing we're doing our best does not absolve us of the responsibility to recognize when we've screwed up. Second, we end up equating harmful behavior with a person's basic character. When we believe that about ourselves, it makes us defensive about our own harmful actions. Of course, it feels humiliating to admit we're wrong, if that necessarily implies ill intent. And so it is for others. We have to have the spiritual maturity to simultaneously hold two seemingly conflicting truths in tension, that we are all doing the best we know at the moment, and that even so, the best we know how to do can cause great damage and be deeply wrong. Regardless of intent, we must be accountable. With that compassionate understanding of ourselves, we're open to learning and unlearning, seeing new realities, recognizing what we didn't know before, doing better as we know better. I know I can. I want to commend to you a new book called Saving Grace. Speak your truth, stay centered, and learn to coexist with people who drive you nuts, by Kirsten Powers. Powers is a CNN senior political analyst, and she was once the liberal voice on Fox News, so presumably she knows whereof she speaks. To quote the publisher, she offers a template whereby we can engage with people who hold opposing views without sacrificing our values or our passionate beliefs in the causes we care about. And the grace that Powers advocates for is not what we often call cheap grace or quietly forgiving harmful behavior. I, for one, was really happy to read her clarification that grace does not mean you have to check your passionate beliefs or personality at the door. You still get to have big emotions and strong opinions and throw a serious side eye when it's needed. You don't have to ditch your dry sarcasm or devastating wit. You aren't required to be pious or earnest. You can still be irreverent and flawed and messy. Grace creates space for all of us. Thank God, that's a relief. And she acknowledges that in the face of wrongdoing or injustice, being filled with anger is normal, healthy, and good. Grace asks no one to find common cause with people who prioritize unity in the dominant culture over equality and justice and dignity for all human beings. It's when the righteous anger starts tilting into self-righteousness, judgment, and hatred that we're in the danger zone, both personally and as a country. And that question about our intentions, or rather other people's intentions, Powers warns us against the delusion of moral superiority, the belief that not only are we motivated by good, but that the other side is motivated by bad. People who believe they are inherently more moral than others, she writes, say things like, I would never do or say the offensive thing so-and-so just did. They would never do the harmful act another person just did or espouse the problematic view that another person holds. They believe they would have been the German who hid Jews and the white person who marched against segregation in the Jim Crow South. You put them in any context, at any point in history, and they would have always believed and done the right things. A person who holds this image of themselves can't offer other people grace because they can't comprehend their own moral frailties or the idea, and this is important, that they are largely the product of the family, culture, and position in society they were born into. So they are quick to judge and slow to empathize. Ouch. And yes. As we consider in the months and years ahead the silences of our history, the urgency of unlearning entrenched harmful narratives, and the inevitability of confronting sustained resistance to learning a more inclusive story, I'm going to give Kirsten Powers the last word. There is no question that we are in the midst of a critical period in American history. It's as though America has been viewed under a magnifying glass. We are noticing fractures in our country, but that doesn't mean those fractures weren't always there. We are seeing America as it truly is, and as painful as that may be for some people, it's always better to deal with truth than to seek comfort in a fiction. We are slowly experiencing correctives to the nation's whitewashed narrative that erases the central role the genocide of Indigenous people and the kidnapping, torture, and enslavement of Black people played in the establishment and economic dominance of the United States. Reckoning with these facts and laboring to create wholeness where destruction occurred should be our central task for years to come. More and more will be revealed. Somehow we have to learn to live with this reality and coexist with people who, and I mean this in the most graceful way possible, we may at times want to, and I must leave Powers' final graphic phrase to your graceful imagination. Indeed. May it be so.
Some closing words. This is a prayer by Jabari Jones, the person that Susan read a piece from. May we remember the wounds of the past that bleed into the present, so that we may heal and grow into the future together, whole and wise. May we remember and be free at last. And I'd just like to say that you're all welcome to stay for conversation, either on Zoom or here in person. We don't have coffee right now because of COVID, but please feel free to stay and chat here in the sanctuary, out in the narthex, or in the Alsop room. As usual, masks are required when you're in the building, and have a great afternoon. And special thanks to the tech crew. They really helped me today.